I've got 10 amazing fantasy recommendations for your middle grade into young YA readers. These are all books that have been tried and tested by a mom and her middle grade readers, and I'm so excited to share them with you today. One of my criteria for middle grade books that I hand to my children is I'm not a big fan of the phrase, "I'm just happy they're reading," for a couple of reasons. I understand the intention behind it, but one of the things that I always try to look at is the quality of what my kids are reading does matter to me. And so I want to hand them things that are going to be a great story, that are going to be entertaining for them, but it's also going to ask them to think critically sometimes, and it might teach them something along the way as well in terms of how books are written, what good storytelling looks like, what a character arc might be. I don't think that books should be super dumbed down just because they're for a younger audience. This video was specifically requested by one of my subscribers, and I looked through so many comments trying to find who you were. So if this was your idea and you suggested it in the last month or two, thank you so much. Please let me know down in the comments. But let's get into this stack because I'm very excited to share these with you guys. The first one that I'm going to hold up is The Clockwork Three by Matthew J. Kirby. This is such a fun standalone book that's kind of got some steampunk vibes, and there are three children whose lives get brought together and intersect, and they realize that they all hold answers to the puzzles that each of them are in. And there's a young girl who's a maid at a hotel, there's a young boy who's an apprentice clockmaker, there's one who's an orphan, who's a street musician, and the world in this story is just so vibrant and interesting and steampunky and fun. And I loved reading this myself when I was younger. Not when I was really young. I think I came to it more as an adult, but I did give it to my son to read, and he also really liked it. And also, this cover is just phenomenal. This one has a lot of great tension in it. It's got a lot of really fun world-building elements like the automatons and the steampunk gears and things in the city. And the three main characters are such an adorable, tiny motley crew. I love them so much. So this is definitely one that made it onto this list very quickly, and I highly recommend for middle grade readers. Next up, we're going to go back to a classic series where if your kid jumps into this series and loves it, the great news about that is that there are a lot of books in the series, and that is Redwall by Brian Jacques. I cannot make a video for middle grade readers without mentioning Brian Jacques because his world of Redwall and the way that he has created this entire universe of talking animals within a classic fantasy model is so brilliant. And while he does utilize a lot of the same formulas for storytelling in the different books, every one feels so unique and different. Even though a lot of the same plot beats do happen, the characters really make this series come alive. And I honestly would recommend starting with Redwall. However, there are so many books in this series that are phenomenal. It's not like one of those things where the first couple books are fantastic and then it just drastically drops off in quality after that. Some of my favorite books are way later on in the series if you're reading chronologically. The fun part is this series really allows you to just grab whatever looks like fun and whatever character on the cover stands out to you, because while they do have a chronological order technically in terms of how they were written, they are still standalone in the sense that you can reach in and grab whichever one looks interesting to you, especially after you've read the first one. I do recommend starting with Redwall, but if you don't, it's not the end of the world. These tales are so classic, and I know I'm going to get a whole bunch of people in the comments who read these as they were growing up, and this series has just left a huge impact on the fantasy community as a whole. So many of us have deep nostalgia roots with the Redwall books, and I highly recommend these to anyone who's looking for fantasy for middle grade readers. Next up is a trilogy that I read with my son in the last year or so, and that is the Mapmaker Chronicles by A.L. Tate. This one definitely has a more nautical theme, and it follows a boy named Quinn who has the secret ability to remember visually anything that he has seen. Now, the king of this world is offering a massive prize to whoever can sail the seas and create the best world map and come back and present it to him. And the trilogy follows Quinn and the ship that he's been assigned to, the captain that he's been assigned to, and the backstories of these characters just kind of unfold as we go along. There's a lot of kind of swashbuckling adventure in a lot of different locations. It's cool because we're actually going around many different places within this world, and the character dynamic between the cast is just so wholesome and wonderful. And there's a lot of great human lessons in here that aren't super heavy-handed, but they still offer the reader something to think about. Now, if your middle grade reader is looking for something that leans a little bit toward the classic epic fantasy, we're going to recommend Stone and Sky by Z.S. Diamante. This is book 1 in the Stone and Sky trilogy, and as you can see, these are a little bit chonkier, very classic epic fantasy roots that are reminiscent of some Tolkien vibes. This story follows a character named Orin, who is a member of a very proud Griffin Rider Guard, who is protecting his nation against the invading army of orcs. Now, when something really horrible happens and Orin finds himself the sole survivor of his squad, he goes on a mission to try and save others from the same fate. Again, this has strong classic epic fantasy vibes. It is incredibly accessible for middle grade readers, so they're going to be getting a taste of that kind of epic fantasy story, but in a very accessible, bingeable trilogy. My son read this in the last year, and he has said that it is now one of his favorite fantasy series of all time, and he absolutely loved it. And the best part is that Z.S. Diamante is putting out new other books kind of in the same world as the Stone and Sky trilogy that are standalone, so if they love the trilogy, there's more for them to read. Now, many people know Cornelia Funke as the author of the famous Inkheart series, but one of my favorite books of hers that I don't hear talked about nearly as often is The Thief Lord by Cornelia Funke. This is a really fun standalone book, and obviously I would also recommend Inkheart for readers who enjoy Cornelia Funke's writing style, but what I love so much about this one is that it is a low fantasy story that takes place in our world in Venice, Italy, so you've got a really interesting atmospheric world with the canals and the rooftops, and we follow kind of an Oliver Twist style gang of children who are led by the Thief Lord. Bo and Prosper are our main characters. They have escaped from their not so great adopted family into the streets, and they have fallen under the protection of the Thief Lord. Now, as this book goes along, Bo and Prosper discover that the Thief Lord is harboring some dark secrets, and they have to go on a journey to a fantastic place to find out what that is. I really love this story, and again, it's a standalone, so it's a great way to taste test Cornelia Funke's work, and she does have other books like Dragon Rider and Inkheart if your middle grade reader enjoys The Thief Lord, but this is my personal favorite of her books. Now, I'm going to hold up another classic series that I read a ton of as a middle grade reader, and my son also has been really getting into in the last few years, and that is the Dinotopia series. This is a series of books that you really can start anywhere, again, kind of like Redwall, and we are introduced to this magical world where dinosaurs still roam the earth, and they have this beautiful symbiotic relationship with humans most of the time. The cool part about this series is that every book is kind of its own contained episode, and we get to delve into all sorts of different areas within this giant island of Dinotopia. We get to meet all sorts of different types of dinosaurs with all different sorts of relationships with the humans that they work with, and we also get to see what happens when some of those dinosaurs don't have a symbiotic positive relationship with humans. This is something that I would say definitely evokes a little bit of that sort of dinosaur movie feel, but you got to add the humans in on top of it. And these are just such good books. They're very quick reads. They're very accessible. This is something that I would highly recommend for a young reader that might struggle a little bit with longer books, because they are great stories contained in a very short page count, and they're just fun. I still enjoy reading these every once in a while as an adult, as a palate cleanser, and I love getting back into this world, and I enjoyed it so much as a middle grader. Now, if your Now, if your middle grader is interested in the kind of hero party type stories and they really like fantasy creatures, a great cozy fantasy novel that I would put at the higher end of middle grade, lower level of YA, is Quaint Creatures by Andrew D. Meredith. The fun thing about this book is it's one of those stories that can easily bridge the gap between adult readers and middle grade readers. There's something here for so many ages of fantasy lovers, which is fantastic. Quaint Creatures is the story of Norik Softstep, who is a giant who left his job as a dungeon inspector to open a veterinary clinic for fantastic beasts. So if you kind of imagine the fantastic beasts and where to find them mixed with all creatures great and small and a lot of the James Herriot stories, you're going to find something like Quaint Creatures. And this is another one that my son read and absolutely loved. It's a really fun story with some twists and turns, and there's a mystery that's being solved in the background, and of course the descriptions of all sorts of crazy fantasy creatures. This one is a lot of fun, and it has a little bit of that cozy kind of wholesome vibe to it as well, which made it an easy choice for this list. Next up is a book that is for readers who want a little bit of that Narnia kind of flavor, and that is going to be The Crystal Throne by Catherine Sullivan. This is a book that I read when I was much younger, and I was selling books myself as a child author, and I ran across Catherine Sullivan. We did a couple of events together, and I loved this story. This book is so fun because it is a kind of a twist on the idea of a Narnian portal fantasy where Jean and Peter are two sort of kind of friends, but not really, who get pulled into a magical world that has been cursed by witches, and they have to work together to unravel the curse and figure out how to get home. Now, the fun twist about this book is that while Jean really firmly believes in magic and she is so invested in unraveling what's going on in this world, her counterpart Peter has always said that he doesn't believe in magic, and so he's trying to come to terms with the fact that magic is now suddenly all around him, and he's not as excited about it as Jean is. So it is kind of a funny play on the grumpy sunshine trope with the two friends and them trying to work together and figure out what is happening to a world that they've never seen before. Again, super accessible, very fun to read, and I read this book multiple times when I was a middle grader. Now, this last one is a fantastic book right smack dab in the middle of middle grade. And what's even cooler about it is that while it's perfect for young readers to pick up on their own, it's also a phenomenal parent-child read-along story. And that is The Tenacious Tale of Tana the Tender Sword. This is book one in what is planned to be a series, and it is written by the team of Dewey Conway and Bill Adams. I read this story recently because it was a finalist in the self-published fantasy blog off of last year, and deservedly so. This is such a fresh, fun twist on middle grade fantasy, and it was so exciting to me to see the future of that category so beautifully represented in this book. Now, in this story, we have wild, wacky fantasy fun. We have Tana the Tender Sword, who is a burgeoning hero, and she's going out on her first missions, and she's going to save the world. Now, alongside her is her slightly grumpier chronicler, Galdefort, who isn't as thrilled about throwing themselves into the face of danger as Tana is. And I love this story because it does such a beautiful job of representing how sometimes we have to work with people that are very different than us, and how that can turn out to be a really beautiful learning experience. That, coupled with the fact that this book has some zany, wacky, wild, and fun fantasy creatures and a really unique and fun antagonist, and it leans on a lot of familiar tropes that are dressed up in a way that feels incredibly fresh and unique. Highly recommend this book, and I'm very excited that there are more books planned in the series. However, this book does wrap up really nicely at the end, so at this moment it is still a fantastic standalone as well. So there you guys have it. These are 10 books that I highly recommend for middle grade fantasy readers. These are all phenomenal books that have been vetted by myself or my son. He is 12 years old and absolutely voraciously reading. And I think that these all represent some great range in terms of accessibility. So if you have a young reader who's really gung-ho about reading, I think these books will still be fantastic for them. And if you have a reader who might be a little bit slower learning, or they might, struggle to get into books a little bit more, there's going to be something in here that will pique their interest, whether they're reading it by themselves or you're reading it with them. And also, all of these books are easily enjoyable by adult readers as well, which I think is equally important if you're going to be reading with your child. And also, that just kind of represents my philosophy on the fact that we should be putting great storytelling in front of our kids. Those are my recommendations for you today. I would love to know down in the comments if you have some recommendations that you loved when you were in middle grade, or if you're a parent, books that you and your child have been loving. Let us know down in the comments. Let me know what you think, if you've read any of these books, and how good of a list you think this is. If you want me to add some more in the future, I would be happy to make another list like this later on. And I hope no matter what you and your middle grader are reading, that they are some 5-star reads. And I hope you're having a great week, and I will see you in the next video.